Welcome to the research process webinar for the 5th climate change assessment. We will get started in a minute as we wait for folks to finish joining. All right, thank you all for joining us today. We are making this webinar available in English and Spanish with simultaneous interpretation. The instructions for accessing the Spanish language audio channel are on your screen. Next slide, please. Welcome to the research process webinar for California's 5th climate change assessment. We're very excited to see you all here today. My name is Neil Matuka. I'm the program manager for California's 5th climate change assessment at the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. A few quick housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website. The chat function is not enabled, so please use the Q&A feature to submit questions during the webinar. Live transcription can be enabled by clicking the CC icon. And as we mentioned before, Spanish language interpretation is available by clicking the globe icon. Today, we will cover a brief overview of the 5th assessment, followed by presentations from the 5th assessment project team on the different funding opportunities available under the 5th assessment program. We will spend the remainder of the hour answering your questions from the Q&A. Next slide, please. With the passage of Senate Bill 1320, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, or OPR, is the interagency coordinator of the 5th assessment in partnership with the California Natural Resources Agency, California Energy Commission, and California Strategic Growth Council. We have a dedicated team to oversee the administration and rollout of the 5th assessment and have funding to support the development of an extensive suite of cutting-edge research on climate change. Next slide, please. We are lucky to be building on a long history of California assessments, starting with the first climate impacts report from the Energy Commission in 1989. Since 2006, at the direction of Executive Order S305, the state has completed 4 comprehensive climate change assessments designed to assess the impacts and risks from climate change to inform policy action. The first 2 assessments focused on understanding climate change and statewide impacts. The 3rd and 4th assessments began to examine the nuances of regional impacts. Next slide, please. The 5th assessment is a 5-year process ending in June of 2026. You can see our overall timeline for the assessment on your screen. I'm going to give you a brief overview of this and then hand it off to my colleagues to get more in depth about each of these opportunities. First, the Energy Commission is leading the production of downscaled climate change projections and data, including climate scenarios such as wildfire and hydrologic modeling. The Energy Commission is also leading the development of original climate research focused on the energy sector. OPR is working with the Natural Resources Agency to produce original climate research not covered by the Energy Commission's EPIC solicitation. Building on lessons learned from the fourth assessment, the fifth assessment is standing up our first ever tribal research program. We will be prioritizing early, often, and meaningful consultation with California Native American tribes. The synthesis of the climate projections data and original climate research will culminate in a series of reports that will call attention to broad climate issues across the state. For our defining statute, this will include a tribal report and a report on environmental justice. However, we intend to support additional topics based on the feedback we've received. We will also develop regionally specific information to help guide communities in responding to the impacts of climate change that affect their particular area. Finally, a statewide summary report will be developed to highlight major findings and lessons learned throughout the assessment. Now I'd like to hand the mic over to my colleague, Susan Wilhelm, to discuss the California Energy Commission's data and analytics.
Thank you so much, Neil, and thank you, whoever magically helped me to unmute. I'm Susan Wilhelm. I'm technical lead of the California Energy Commission's Energy-Related Environmental Research Unit. As Neil mentioned, CEC has a number of ongoing efforts to produce foundational data, including climate projections, as well as hydrologic and wildfire scenarios. These data represent a vast expansion on the climate projections that were developed to support the fourth assessment. With the fifth assessment, we are expecting about 2 orders of magnitude more data. And this proliferation of data offers us huge opportunities as it brings unprecedented publicly available climate information to local scales in California at time scales of human activities. As you might imagine, this massive amount of data also poses challenges, as costs of data storage and analysis are major considerations with this scale of data. Fortunately, Amazon Web Services Open Data Sponsorship Program has generously supported the initial foray into this amount of data storage. So to further meet the moment with regard to the climate data we're making available for the fifth assessment, we have expanded CalAdapt beyond the interactive web application that many of you are already familiar with. Specifically, we have funded development of the CalAdapt analytics engine. The analytics engine will provide support and effective application of climate data for energy sector resilience. And more generally, it will provide open data and analytical resources for all users. Additionally, we are working to update the CalAdapt web application so that the more general users who rely on it can access the next generation of climate data that roll out with the fifth assessment. This update will provide a platform which may be initially sparse, but will allow for powerful follow-on work that can support visualizations and tools using the fifth assessment data. Next slide, please. Okay, through competitive solicitations, CEC has already awarded 3 EPIC awards. EPIC is our funding program, the Electric Program Investment Charge. So 3 EPIC awards for energy sector resilience research that builds on the climate data and analytics discussed in the prior slide. These research efforts are working to parameterize emerging relationships between climate, electricity supply, and electricity demand as California transitions to 100% clean energy. They're also contributing to climate-informed demand forecasting and integrated resource planning, and exploring climate-related changes to zero carbon generation. Ultimately, this research will help us plan a cost-effective, reliable, and resilient grid. We have 2 additional EPIC solicitations that will contribute to the fifth assessment. First, through GFO Grant Funding Opportunity 22302, which you see on the first bullet, the link on the far right, we will contribute to development of methods for valuation of societal benefits of customer and grid resilience investments. such as microgrids, distributed generation, storage. This solicitation is currently in the application phase, with applications due mid-January and pre-application workshop tomorrow. The second bullet you see here under future awards relates to a solicitation that's expected to release early in 2023. This solicitation will advance science-based strategies for precipitation enhancement to increase hydropower potential and water resources for the electricity sector. And in closing, I would just like to note that EPIC competitive bids are open to all public and private entities, with the exception of publicly owned utilities. Thanks, and I will pass to Clessie now.
Hi, thanks, Susan. My name is Clessie Bennett, and I'm an environmental scientist at the California Natural Resources Agency. And I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the agency's role in the fifth assessment through administering the original climate research program. And on the slide, this is represented by the pink bar with the red box around it. Next slide, please. So through a competitive process, this program will be awarding funding for research to fill gaps in California, the state of California's understanding and adaptation to climate change impacts. The awarded research will be in alignment with the state's priority research gaps and climate and equity goals. We anticipate that all public and private entities will be eligible to receive this funding. And we plan to solicit proposals in early 2023 with the announcement of awards anticipated for mid-2023. And lastly, we anticipate that the final deliverables of this program will wrap in the third quarter of 2025. And with that, I'll pass it over to our colleagues to discuss the tribal research program.
Great, thank you so much, Clessie. I'm now going to speak on the tribal research program. So the fourth assessment in 2018 was the first time there was a focus on tribes with the Tribal and Indigenous Communities report. You can see it highlighted with the red box here. If you could advance the slide, please. Okay, due to the success of that report, this program was built. The purpose of the tribal research program is to expand tribal capacity, support tribally led research, and encourage participation in the fifth assessment. A focus of this will be to respectfully support traditional knowledges in what has historically been a Western science-dominated process. With the tribal research program, we are committing to ensuring a meaningful and respectful process with tribes, lifting up the great work that's already being done and supporting tribally led research moving forward. Our goal really is to create a partnership and continue to nourish partnerships with tribes in our climate change work. Some things this includes is respecting data sovereignty and supporting tribally led processes. So we're building this program based on lessons learned from the fourth assessment, as I mentioned, as well as engagement and consultation we've done since July of 2022. The main components you'll see on your screen here of the tribal research program are prioritizing early, frequent, and meaningful consultation with California Native American tribes, as well as engaging in a diversity of other engagement efforts with the intention of meeting tribes where they are. We are standing up a tribal advisory group. We are anticipating it to be comprised of representatives from California tribes to guide the tribal research program, providing advice through the 4 years on topics such as ensuring research priorities are meaningful and beneficial to California tribes. The next component is a tribal grant program managed or administered by the Energy Commission, will support tribal participation and capacity and encourage the tribally led research within the assessment. My colleague will speak more to that in just a moment. We also are supporting traditional knowledges and tribal expertise within fifth assessment reports. But the key here is where it's meaningful for tribes and culturally appropriate. So we have a little bit to work through there. We really want to take the time to do consultation so we can understand where and how this is meaningful and respectful. For example, if we're funding traditional knowledge projects, really being mindful of what needs to remain confidential with the tribe and what can be shared broader. And then finally, as was mentioned, we are doing a tribal and indigenous communities synthesis report, similar to the fourth assessment tribal and indigenous communities report, and hopefully building on that, that will assess climate impacts to tribal communities statewide. And with that, I will hand it to my colleague with the CEC, Gabriel.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gabriel Rourke. I am the California Energy Commission's lead on the Tribal Grant Program for the 5th Climate Assessment. Here, I will cover the program's purpose, eligibility, funding amounts, types of grants, and the projected schedule. Can we go back to the previous slide, please? Thanks. Oh, wait. Go ahead, actually. The purpose of this solicitation is to provide funding for tribally led climate change research, support for traditional knowledges, and similar projects deemed to be a priority by tribal applicants. As you can see on the slide, eligible applicants include California Native American tribes, tribal serving non-governmental organizations, and other California tribal organizations. May I have the next slide, please? Okay. We have $3.625 million available for grants under this solicitation and expect to award them over 3 rounds, extending from 2023 through 2026. Grant funding levels will vary based on project type and tribal need. Currently, we conceive of these as 3 funding levels: $20,000 cap for small grants, $100,000 for medium-sized grants, and $200,000 for large grants. Any other grant types could also provide match funding for another topically related grant not funded through this program. We've currently identified 6 project categories for funding. Each project must align with at least one of these groups. We'll evaluate all applications, score them, and rank them against other applications submitted within the same grant round. The grant groups consist of climate change research grants in Group 1. Group 2 comprises our climate assessment grants. We also have implementation grants. These are your classical mitigation projects. Group 4, information sharing grants. In the 5th group, we have tool development. And because we can't think of everything, Group 6 is other and would be self-identified by applicants. The information gathered from this research will help inform tribal synthesis reports, topical reports, and regional reports with respect for the confidentiality and data sovereignty values of grant recipients. We're aiming to release the draft solicitation about December 1 and to begin a public comment period before releasing the final solicitation in January of 2023. And we anticipate moving into grant development through spring. And with that, I will hand it over to Aaliyah. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Aaliyah Becker-Lowe, and I'm a senior planner at OPR. I'm very excited to give you kind of a glimpse into some of the plans that we're developing to synthesize all of the information you just heard about. Those products, the modeling, the projections, the various original research, the tribal research program and grants, those are all so foundational to the broader process. And we really want to knit this all together in a variety of ways. We're very fortunate to have funding this time and a great baseline to build from to produce reports that are regionally relevant, others that consider specific issues of statewide concerns, and a synthesis document to compile all of our findings and takeaways in one place. So we'll be starting with the structure that was established by the fourth assessment, but in the coming year, we're going to be working with groups across California to determine an updated scope of some of these works. And I think some examples from the fourth assessment might help kind of give you a sense of the work to come this time around. So if you could advance to the next slide, please. So this image comes from the fourth assessment statewide synthesis report, which you can find at climateassessment.ca.gov. And it shows the 9 regions that were addressed in the fourth assessment. And so we're going to start with these, but based on some feedback we've already received and other input that we're going to be collecting throughout the coming year, we may make some minor adjustments to these boundaries to try to get a better representation of the community-specific issues and informational needs across the state. The 3 icons you see just outside the map of California represent the topical reports that were showcased in the fourth assessment. These include a report on tribal and indigenous communities, a report on climate justice, and one on oceans and coasts. The fifth assessment is going to again focus on reports regarding equity and tribal knowledges, and we'll also have the opportunity to consider other themes that rise up as significant across the state in our topical work ahead. Our initial goal for both of these products is to work very closely with communities, and that includes practitioners, researchers, government agencies at all levels, tribes, and other residents across the state to really understand the specific concerns and the nuanced climate vulnerabilities that each region is going to be experiencing. And we're going to be hosting a variety of opportunities for folks to engage with us and to offer input about what information they feel they're lacking, how best to present our findings in a way that they're most likely to be able to use them, and to discuss how we can work together to achieve the state's climate change goals. So we do not yet have all of these events scheduled, but we will be kicking off this work next year. And in the meantime, if you could advance to the next slide, we have some links where you can peruse our website, you can sign up for our listserv. We really encourage you to stay in the loop as these plans take shape. And you can also always reach out to us with any questions at climateassessment@opr.ca.gov. And if you could advance to the next slide, I will welcome back our panelists and turn it back to Neil to guide us through the Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aaliyah, and thank you, everyone. A wonderful presentation. We'd like to open it up to some more questions. We've been getting some great questions in the Q&A. Please submit any questions that you have through that function, and we're going to answer as many of those as we can tonight. A couple of them we're going to answer right in the Q&A function if they're small answers, but most will go live and hand them off to some of the other participants. So we're going to start with a question from Ariane Laxo about, will CalAdapt updates include data that can be used in building energy modeling and analysis tools? Currently, post-processing must be done in order to use CalAdapt data for energy modeling. And I'm going to invite my colleague Susan to answer this question as it relates to her program.
Thanks, Neil, and thanks very much for this question. The short answer is that through extensive stakeholder engagement and workshops that were held throughout 2021, development of hourly climate profiles for future time periods was identified as a priority. And this is specifically intended to help provide input for a number of energy-related uses that include energy load forecasting, production cost modeling, and other modeling efforts. So I would say that in general, while the analytics engine, the CalAdapt analytics engine, is delivering flexible, open data and analytics to support a variety of users, it sounds like you have a very specific file format and use case. So I would welcome you reaching out directly to me at susan.wilhelm@energy.ca.gov to make sure you're connected with those conversations. But I'd say I would anticipate that it would be within reach to move from the types of products that are already in the queue for analytics engine to comma-separated, variable files of hourly weather variables critical to building modeling and analysis at select locations. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question from Jonathan Parfrey. How are the regional assessments going to be administered, and will the geographic boundaries remain the same as those in the fourth assessment? Thank you, Jonathan. This is a great question and exactly the reason we wanted to have this webinar. I'm going to start with the geographic boundaries first. That's a little bit easier. We are starting with those boundaries and anticipate that they will probably remain the same, potentially with some tweaks to address some of the data or viability concerns that came up during the last assessment. But for now, I would operate under the assumption that we will use very similar regions, if not the same. In terms of administering the regional report to the assessment, we are planning on starting a process early next year with listening sessions and regional meetings to start to convene folks and get together a coalition of folks in each region in order to support those programs. We do have funding this time, and we're going to be using the Strategic Growth Council's climate change research model, which is a community involved and community-led research program to make sure that the team is multidisciplinary, represents communities, represents the best available science, and we can have a single team for each region that is supported by that contract. So we don't have more answers than that right now, but that'll be an ongoing process that happens over the next year with that anticipated that we'll be able to start work on those regional reports the end of next year, beginning of 2024. Okay, just a reminder, please put your questions into the Q&A function. We're sorting through those right now. A lot of energy questions today. I have another question for Susan. Are there any interactions with the CEC's upcoming Climate Innovation Program?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The Climate Innovation Program is running out of a sister branch within the Energy Research Division. And we are coordinating, but I would just say the short answer is that they're not directly plugged into the fifth assessment. It's more of an on-the-ground resilience effort. And I'm happy to find a link and drop it in for those who'd like to learn more about it.
Thank you. Next, we have a question for Patricia. Will historic and cultural resources be included in this fifth assessment?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really great question. I can say that climate change impacts to tribal cultural resources and historic properties, historic resources, very widely has risen to the top of priorities that we've heard. We've heard it in our listening sessions with tribes and a couple different venues, actually. So we are hearing this as a research priority, and we are anticipating this being something that comes up in the tribal research grant, hopefully through a proposal, and anticipate it being included in the tribal and indigenous communities report. However, we haven't really scoped completely out what that looks like, but we do anticipate that being part of it. Another thing to add is proposals such as these can be topics that could be proposed through CNRA's core research program that Clessie Bennett just spoke on. So there's a couple different ways we could see this kind of coming into the fifth assessment.
Thank you, Patricia. Next, we have a question for Clessie. Is there a total dollar amount for the competitive funding program? And I assume that that is the natural resources led RFP program or solicitation. And have you envisioned the subcategories and grant amount?
Great questions. As you mentioned, I'm going to specifically focus on CNRA's program, not including the others that have their own pots of money attached to them. CNRA received around $6 million for this piece of the program. There will be some administrative costs associated with hiring that we're going to be doing. So we anticipate it'll be just under $6 million. We don't have subcategories per se. We have gone through a process of developing priority research gaps. You may have tuned in to a number of expert panels that the fifth assessment team hosted, I believe, last month. I think 6 of them, going through many of these gaps. So those will be included as part of the solicitation. And as far as dollar amounts, we also are at this point do not have a set range, but we do anticipate proposals to come in a the $100,000 to $500,000 range. But again, this is anticipated. We're still working out some of the details here. And I don't know, Neil, if you want to speak to other parts of the program, or if the question was just on CNRA.
I think it was probably just about the CNRA program, but I can speak very generally. We don't have specific subcategories or grants amount yet. We do have a total amount of funding, the entire program. And I think that will, the total amount that's available for each type of resource will depend on how much is needed to complete those tasks. So we should have a better sense when we get closer. Okay, we have another question for Susan. Your data is quite popular this evening. When are the downscaled CNRA 6 climate model projection data available?
Thank you. Thank you for bearing with my unmute process. 2 answers. The first answer is some of it is available right now. And just let me make sure I'm not steering you wrong. If you go to analytics.caladapt.org, you will be able to find the data catalog for some dynamically downscaled CMIP 6 products that are available right now. However, you may be referring specifically to the statistically downscaled products that that Scripps Institution of Oceanography will deliver, and we are anticipating those early in 2023. So at that point, we will have again a really powerful data set that includes both the dynamically downscaled projections, which have larger spatial coverage, more variables, higher temporal resolution, and the statistically downscaled data product, which has, I believe, about 100 ensemble members, more GCMs, more emission scenarios, and provides the power of allowing us to explore just a hugely rich data set. Thanks.
Thank you. Following up on a couple of energy questions, our next question, this webinar seems to be highly focused on energy. How do the resources on water and water resilience be distributed? This is a great question, and appreciate you bringing that up. The focus on energy, I think, is a historical focus from how the CEC's traditional role in supporting the previous assessment and in supporting this assessment. And therefore, they have the ongoing EPIC solicitations that support the assessment and support the modeling and data production. We are planning on providing research and resources to investigate water and water resilience, among other non-energy topics, primarily through the Natural Resources Agency-led core climate research process, where we've developed the research priorities list, and many of those are non-energy focused. There are a couple of energy because the EPIC program can't cover all energy topics, but they're heavily focused on water and biodiversity, natural land built infrastructure. We also anticipate that the regional reports will take a water focus, as we think that that's very relevant to many of the regions. Susan, did you want to?
Yeah, I would just second everything that Neil said and add that, as he alluded to, the first assessment that was released out back in 2006 was funded through CEC research that was ongoing at that time. And just having established funding streams, as well as the ability to fund some products that are incredibly valuable for the energy sector, such as the projections, data analytics, also valuable for other users. It puts us in a position to have a really nice partnership with OPR, CNRA, and others.
Thank you. Next question we want to talk about. How will the issues of climate justice and equity be organized? That's a great question. So as we mentioned in the synthesis report section, one of the topical reports will be an equity and environmental justice report, as it was in the fourth assessment. That was very well received, so we're doing it again in this round. We're also planning on making sure that equity and environmental justice are cross-cutting themes throughout the rest of the research that we're funding in the reports. We want to make sure that it's not just siloed into a single report, but instead is woven into the research questions and the report development process for the rest of the assessment as well. Next, we have a comment from Asha Nierhausen, thank you, about input within the fourth assessment. I'll hand this off to Patricia.
Hi, thank you. Yes, and Pasha, thank you so much for joining us today. It looks like you're interested in the synthesis reports, the regional reports, and our experience with the fourth assessment, where there might have been gaps in the fourth assessment. And in general, we've heard some general input that, like I said before, impacts to tribal cultural resources is one example where tribes really want to learn more. And then in general, the consideration of tribal expertise and traditional knowledge, where it has the opportunity to be expanded and respectfully woven into the fifth assessment. So those are the types of things we're hearing and where we might be able to focus some of our attention in the tribal synthesis report, and then also the tribal components of the regional reports. However, Pasha, I should say that we haven't even started scoping these yet, right? So when it comes, I think like the beginning, as Aaliyah mentioned, in the start to spring of 2023, we're going to be doing very robust engagement on what these reports look like, how we approach them, and what's included in them. There is separate funding for these efforts, so we'll really take those on at that time. And then I also want to say the grant program that Gabriel spoke to, we will be having our first round coming up within the next few months. We do hope results from that grant program can help inform some of these reports as well. So it's kind of coming from a few different angles, but definitely a lot more discussions to have. But if you are interested in a specific proposal, I do recommend looking into reach out to me or Gabriel, and we'll keep you updated on the grant program as an opportunity to get funded for that research.
Thank you, Patricia. Our next question, do you envision in coordinating with the University of California on their $100 million climate research initiative? If yes, what does that look like? This is a great question, one that we have been thinking about ourselves. We have been in conversation with the University of California and CSU system recently, as well as over the past couple of months, talking about exactly this question. We are not sure what that coordination looks like, but we will have ongoing conversations. We want to make sure that the work that we are doing and the work that they are doing under that climate research initiative are complementary and can work together if that's possible. And we think it is. Our next question. Our nonprofit generates research about the long-term future, including regarding climate. We understand that we are an eligible applicant for the climate research portions of what has been presented. How do we know if we are a good fit for what you're looking for in potential applicants? Are you looking for more technical, quantitative-driven scenarios? This is a great question, and I'd like to answer it a little bit higher level first, and hand off to my colleague Plessy. I think that in general, we are making sure that the assessment has space for quantitative, qualitative research, for communities, for everyone to participate in various capacities throughout the assessment. So, there definitely, we get this question a lot about social sciences or qualitative research, and there's definitely a space for it in the assessment. Plessy?
Hey, yes, just to build on what Neil said, we are hoping to solicit proposals that include a wide variety of different research methodologies and techniques, including things that you've mentioned, like oh my gosh, can't say that word today, including some of these more social science methods. So I would say, yes, there's definitely room for that. And thus far, as we've envisioned the program, we don't anticipate imposing any requirements around certain methodologies being used and having to have quantitative results or something like that. So yeah, I think there's definitely room.
Thank you, Plessy. Our next question, and is the last question that we have so far. So if you have more questions, please drop them into the Q&A. For Gabriel and Patricia, regarding the tribal grants, will the $3.6 million be sub-segmented by the 6 funding categories? And will implementation, classical mitigation projects be expected to demonstrate cost effectiveness?
Those are terrific questions. Thank you for bringing those forward. Patricia, if you don't mind, I think I'll go ahead and take this one. The short answer for the first part of your question is no, we're not going to segment or divide the 3.6 million between the 6 categories, or that is to say, we're not going to have set pots of money for each. our intent in bringing forward the 6 grant types is to provide some guidance to applicants on just exactly what the breadth and potentially depth of applications could qualify for this program. And then as far as cost effectiveness, it's far from the only metric that we're going to use to evaluate applications. That is one of them. We do hope to see good value for costs, as it were, in the applications. But that is categorically, that's only one of at least 5 or 6 different evaluation criteria that we're thinking about right now. And if you have further questions, I'm happy to answer those, and so would Patricia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 last questions, 3. How are the authors for reports going to be selected? So the answer to this depends on which type of report we're referring to. There will be a competitive solicitation process. So both the EPIC program and CNRA's core climate research programs are competitive. And so those will be selected through a review process that will select individual researchers or research teams to perform the research. For the other reports, regional and topical reports, we don't yet have a clear answer for you on that. But for the regional reports, we're hoping that that is a coalition in each region, so that we don't exclude those who would like to participate. And we'll provide more information on those probably mid next year. And a related question to that, will authors of all reports be funded? We are planning on providing funding for each of the products. And a great segue to our next slide is, where can we get more information on the upcoming meetings? If we go to the next slide, please. Perfect. You can go to the OPR website at the bottom of your screen to track updates and announcements. This is the website for the 5th assessment process. You'll find our timeline, you'll find our fact sheets, you'll find our listserv there. And this is where we'll be posting new webinars, meetings, and information as it becomes available. The climate assessment website on the screen includes, and now in your chat, thank you, Natalie. That includes the information from the 4th assessment, and that will be updated with 5th assessment products and documents as those become available. You can also feel free to reach out to us. I know a lot of the team members have included their contact information in the chat. You can reach any of us by emailing us at climateassessment@opr.ca.gov, and we'll make sure that gets to the right person. We appreciate you taking the time this evening. We do have 2 last questions that we can follow up with, if these are fairly quick. I think we have time. Gabriel, there's a follow-up question for you. The decision to not pre-limit funding by categories makes sense. Have specific tool development or enhancement needs been articulated by tribal representatives to date? If so, where would we locate these?
Yeah, this is from T. Conlon. Thank you for the question, as well as the feedback. Yeah, I can't think of a specific example of tool development or enhancement coming to us from tribes at this time. However, we know that from Susan Wilhelm's presentation, that the sheer glut of climate data out there can be challenging for anybody to access and sift through, let alone use. So we definitely wanted to make sure that tribes and allied organizations understand that a tool development grant or application is a valid grant here. Sorry. Yeah, and there are probably opportunities for tool synthesis as well. So, again, we didn't want to rule anything out, is the short answer.
Neil, is it okay if I just add to that real quick?
Please. Yep.
I think one thing that we've heard, this is really interesting. And so if you have additional feedback, we'd love to hear it on specific ideas. One thing that we've heard from tribes, and I think Gabriel already alluded to this, is that there's a lot of feeling of being overwhelmed by all of the different tools out there, not knowing what to use when, what applies to tribes, how tribal data or lack of tribal data might impact some decisions within those tools. So I think the idea of trying to create a tool, find a tool, adapt a tool so it's meaningful and respectful for tribes is something that a conversation we'll probably have down the road, but we haven't really heard specific examples of what this looks like yet. So reach out to Gabriel or myself. We would love to hear if you have ideas on what that might look like.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate you all taking the time to be here with us tonight. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions or to find out more about the fifth assessment. We're very excited to continue this work and look forward to partnering with all of you moving forward. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.